Hello, dear viewers. You're watching RTD's English News Edition. Here are our headlines for this evening. President Gele participates in the high-level meeting on Somalia in New York. Concerning global warming, the Bolivian forest emptied of its fauna, 2.3 million animals burned. Thank you for joining us in our newsroom. The President of the Republic, His Excellency Ismail Merguele, sent a message of condolence to his French counterpart, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, Tuesday, following the death of Jacques Chirac, the former President of the French Republic, today. In his message, President Gele paid tribute to the memory of an enlightened leader who left his mark on the history of his country. I'm all the more moved by the death of Jacques Chirac because he was a friend of Djibouti who was still working to preserve and strengthen the exceptional relations between our country and France. President Ismail Omar Guelleh wrote, with the death of Jacques Chirac, this passionate person for Africa, France, and the world are losing an undeniable source of inspiration in terms of boldness and sincerity in politics, stressed the Djibouti head of state, who called for his sad condolences to be extended to the family, the relatives of the former leader, and the entire friendly people of France. Jacques Chirac, 86, died Thursday after a long illness that made his public appearance increasingly rare. Continuing with the national news, Somalia is now ready to take on control of its future because for the first time in 3 decades, the country will hold elections based on one man, one voice in 2020 and 2024. It was in these terms that President Ismail Merguele spoke at the high-level meeting organized by the nation of headquarters, United Nations headquarters. This meeting is taking place following recent advances that Somalia has made on several fronts, although the challenges remain daunting. Thus, the national security system adopted a few years ago in London and the February 28 Moldova Agreement on resource sharing have allowed Somalis to converge and discuss openly with Galmudug at meetings organized by the Somali federal government. This high-level meeting was based on the development that Somalia has experienced in recent years, despite the many political and security obstacles. That said, Djibouti side congratulated the Somali government, supported by the international community, for producing tangible and reliable results. This meeting was attended by the heads of states of Djibouti, and Somalia, the chairman of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, as well as an audience of officials concerned with the Somali issue. At this high-level meeting, President of the Republic delivered an important speech in which he indicated that despite the many obstacles faced by Somalia, we can today welcome the fact that the government's efforts have yielded tangible and commendable results. Let's listen to the President of the Republic.
It is a definite privilege for me to stand before the rostrum to discuss with you the situation in Somalia. The last 3 years, ladies and gentlemen, have been marked by remarkable developments in Somalia. Despite the many political and security challenges facing Somalia, we can now welcome the fact that the government's efforts, supported by the international community, have yielded tangible and commendable results. I am thinking of the formation of a government with a crucial reform agenda, the improvement of finance and the security environment, and the reduction of the impact of humanitarian disasters, to name a few. Politically, we have seen that the federal system adopted has not always generated the same level of understanding and acceptance throughout the country, and has been at the root of terrible tension that have long prevented the progress that this sister country would have made. Long prevented the progress. Politically, we have seen that the federal system adopted has not always generated the same level of understanding and acceptance throughout the country, and has been at the root of terrible tension that have long prevented the progress that this sister country would have made, and it is in this spirit that the current government has been working from the very beginning to change this perception and succeeded in having the national security system adopted in London and the agreements on resource sharing adopted at the Bay Double Conference in February 2018. This made possible the holding of the Reconciliation Conference organized under the aegis of the Somali government, which ended last week in Dusamared, the capital of the federated state of Galmudug, with a consensus agreement. We are pleased that this conference, which initially aimed to resolve political disputes between the main political forces in the region over the holding of elections, has finally extended to the pacification of all tribes in conflict in order to restore peace and social harmony in this brotherly country.
Continuing his speech, President Gele stressed that Somalia is ready to take control of its future because for the first time in 3 decades, Somalia will hold elections based on the principle of one man, one vote in 2020-2024. So let's hear again from the head of state.
Despite a positive growth rate, the country remains highly dependent on international aid. As a heavily indebted country, Somalia has set itself the objective of debt cancellation in accordance with the instructions of the financial institutions in order to normalize its relation with them, and we welcome this and express our hope that debt cancellation will be achieved. There has certainly been a significant improvement in terms of security, ladies and gentlemen. However, much remains to be done as the security situation remains unstable. The capital is facing regular attacks from the Al-Shabaabs, who, despite enormous losses and defeats inflicted by AMISOM troops, are not losing hope and are preparing to return in force to the withdrawal of AMISOM in 2021. We can never repeat it enough. A Somali army capable of taking over after the exit of foreign troops is necessary. But this is not viable without support from the international community, and this support is desired today more than yesterday, because we are at a turning point in the history of Somalia. Turning because we are witnessing today the rejection of the Somali people of the Al-Shabaab and other extremism entities, the integration of the paratroopers in Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah into the ranks of the regular army, the enrollment and effective registration of all army elements and their equipment in Somali National Army common file. This, ladies and gentlemen, proves, if necessary, that Somalia is ready to take control of its future, because for the first time in 3 decades, Somalia will hold election based on one man, one vote in 2020-2021. The Independent Electoral Commission set up for this purpose is working hard and has made enormous progress. Political parties are registered and the government has submitted the electoral law to parliaments. We cannot afford to lose these gains, because the challenge facing Somalia can only be met if the international community converges all its efforts on the same direction. It is a truth, even an evidence, that must serve as a matrix for us. For our part, we remain optimistic and available because we have always been on the side of peace and have constantly worked for a stable Somalia at peace with itself. Let's try to help the Somali people come together and build a Somali state of peace and prosperity. Thank you very much.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, who attended at President Gele's side a high-level meeting on Somalia, briefed the media. In particular, he referred to the comments of the head of state on the role that Djibouti continues to play in Somali peace efforts. The minister's statement focused on Djibouti's great role in bringing stability, security, and peace in Somalia. He noted that Djibouti has always stood by its Somali brothers to improve the security situation and restore security and stability in Somalia. A large delegation of French parliamentarians who have been staying in Djibouti for several days has been received by the Prime Minister and acting head of the government, Abdul Qadir Kamil Mohammed, yesterday in the morning. More details with Tariq Adnan.
Prime Minister and acting head of government Abdulqadir Kamil Mohammed yesterday received a large delegation of French parliamentarians who have been staying in Djibouti for several days. Introduced by the ambassador of the French Republic to Djibouti, Arnaud Gillois, and by the honorable members Mrs. Neema Bulhan, the delegation led by the Member of Parliament for Caen, Calvados region, Bertrand Bouyux, and chairman of the France-Djibouti Friendship Group, including 4 MEPs. Speaking, "You do us honor," said Deputy Bertrand Bouyux to the Prime Minister, whom he thanked for the warm welcome extended to the delegation. Mr. Bouyux went on to add that it was admirably received by all the country's authorities. The Prime Minister said he was pleased to receive the French delegation, which by virtue and its composition reflects both the geographical and political diversity of France. The meeting was then punctuated by mutual compliments and exchanges around the common values forged by the centenary bond of friendship and partnership between France and Djibouti. In addition, the future of the Francophonie, the economic prospect for the two countries, and the need for France to be present and support Djibouti in its economic development were the topics discussed during the courtesy visit of the French delegation to the Prime Minister's office. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Abdulqadir Kamil Mohammed invited the delegation to continue its visit by suggesting some historical sites, including the arcade of the city center, the ice pack of Lac Assal, and the former residence of Léon Lagarde in Obok, built in Madrepores.
The Palace of the People hosted this morning a high-level meeting to discuss the prospects for the banking and financial sector in Djibouti under the leadership of the Prime Minister. Let's watch this video.
Under the aegis of Prime Minister Abdulqadir Kamil Mohammed, a high-level meeting was held to discuss the prospect for the banking and financial sector in Djibouti, with around the table the private sector actors, especially banks and finance, and also members of the government, with a key question: find or bring about the necessary reforms in targeted sectors for better financial inclusion. The main objective was, on the one hand, to provide a clear vision of the banking and financial sector, as well as to develop desirable reforms. A presentation by the Ernst and Young Group of Tunisia prepared this report, an analysis of the financial and banking sector through the identification of its main characteristics and its contribution to the country's economic and social development. These analyses covered inter alia credit market policy, the financing of economic activities, the links between the financial sector and the rest of the economy, as well as the development prospect of the financial sectors and its impact on the national economy. Among the recommendation, it was noted that in order to support the emergence of a strong financial sector capable of financing the growth of the Djibouti economy,
the Governor of the Republic, Mr. Ahmed Osman, recalled in his speech that the Central Bank of Djibouti has always supported President Gille's vision of making Djibouti an international logistical and financial hub. As for the Minister of Finances, Mr. Yasmous Douale highlighted a brief history of Djibouti's development as a financial center in its own right, a vision, he said, that the head of state has formalized into an ambition. In his speech at the workshop, Mr. Abdulqadir Kamil Mohammed, Prime Minister and head of the government, cited the strengths of our system that are known, such as over liquidity, openness to the world, the quality of staff, and the diversity of banks. Nevertheless, continuing the Prime Minister, the government is strongly motivated to know how the improvement of weak points can be resolved, knowing the break to the country's economic development that constitutes the two-way contribution of banking operators in financing growth. The Prime Minister concluded his speech by stating that the results of this study will be carefully analyzed by the government and the Central Bank of Djibouti, and will also be compared with the studies from other ongoing sources, including the IMF, as improving financial sector regulation and supervision is an integral part of the government's strategy. Focusing on the means to be implemented to coordinate the action of the Ministry of Budget with ANP and the Ports and Free Zones authorities to optimize the mobilization of state revenues was at the center of discussions this morning in a three-party meeting. Let's watch this video.
The Minister of Budget, His Excellency Abdul Karim Aden shared today a meeting in his cabinet to which were invited the President of the Ports and Free Zones Authority, Mr. Abu Bakr Mohammed Hadi, and his technical staff, the Director of the ANPI, or National Agency for the Promotion of Investment, Mr. Mahdi Darar Obsir. Also present at this meeting were the Director General of Customs and Indirect Duties, the Director General of Taxes, the Senior Advisor, and the Secretary General of the Ministry of the Budget. The discussion focused on the means to be implemented to coordinate the actions of the Ministry of Budget with INPI and the ports on free zone authorities to optimize the mobilization of state revenues.
As well, in his intervention, the chairman of the Ports and Free Zone Authorities, Mr. Abu Bakr Omar Hadi, thanked the Minister of Budget, Mr. Abdul Karim Aden, for convening his department for this three-party meeting on the establishment of a joint committee between the Ministry and the Customs, the Ports and Free Zone Authorities, and the National Investment Promotion Agency. He said the purpose of this meeting is how to establish close cooperation between these different constituents. We have concluded a common and general agreement to link the electronic system between institutions. Where we have established a new system in the field of electronic continuity, the President of the Port Authorities services systems called information systems for the port community. During this meeting, we seek to integrate the electronic systems enjoyed by each institution such as Customs, Port Authorities, Free Zones, and the National Investment Promotion Agency. A committee of experts in this field has been assigned to implement this convention, he said. In his intervention, the Minister of Budget, Mr. Abdul Karim Aden pointed out the importance of this occasion, which brought together officials of the Ministry of Budget and Port Authorities as well as the Customs. During this occasion, it was agreed on many issues of interest to the parties, especially the establishment of a committee composed of the authority and the Ministry of Budget and Customs. An important delegation of the World Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria had a meeting with the Minister of Health, Mr. Mohammed Warsame Dirie. For more details, let's watch Tariq Adnan.
Minister of Health, Mr. Mohammed Warsame Dirie, had a working meeting, which is an important delegation of the World Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, which is led by the Djibouti Portfolio Manager for the Global Fund, Mrs. Emina Ray Florentis. The two sides discussed the evaluation of health programs supported by the Global Fund, focusing on ways and means to strengthen the technical partnership in the fight against the three diseases, HIV, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. This meeting therefore allowed the members of the delegation to inquire about the tangible progress made by Djibouti in the fight against the three diseases, and more particularly that concerning malaria. To this end, the Minister of Health, Mr. Mohammed Warsame Dirie, recalled all the flagship measures that have been taken by the government to effectively combat the proliferation of mosquitoes through anti-vector campaign of indoor spraying that is currently taking place in high-risk areas. The Global Fund delegation visited the field to assess the successful implementation of this intra-housing spraying campaign in Ward 4.
In the framework of meeting, the authorities of the country, members of the France-Djibouti, a friendship group of the French National Assembly, were received by the Colonel Zakaria Hassan Aden, Chief of Staff of the National Gendarmerie. More in this video.
Bertrand Bouix, MP, and the new French ambassador to Djibouti, His Excellency Arnaud Goulois, this French parliamentary delegation was able to visit the new international school located at PK 23, in the presence of the two Djiboutian parliamentarians, Mr. Abdi Issa Boulale and Mr. Ibrahim Ahmed Abdo. The delegation was received by the Chief of Staff of the National Gendarmerie and several senior gendarmerie officers in the EA3PG VIP lounge, before moving to the large presentation room where the school commander, squadron leader Hussein Mohammed Qayad, gave a presentation on the EA3PG. At the end of the presentation, a guided tour of the school was given to the delegation. During the visit, the French parliamentarians had the opportunity to exchange views with the 19 trainees of the International Investigative Director Internship from 15 countries on the African continent and the Indian Ocean, which closed this morning at 9:30. The parliamentarians of the French-Djibouti Friendship Group expressed their satisfaction with the visit and welcome they received, and above all with the very good feedback given by the trainees on the content of the internship program and accommodation conditions. The visit ended with the exchange of gifts and a traditional photo family.
MP of France Djibouti Friendship Group expressed its satisfaction with the visit and the warm welcome he received, as well as the very good feedback given by the trainees on the content of the internship program and the accommodation conditions at the camp. An important closing ceremony of the CM1 internship for 46 Republican Guard interns took place this morning, Thursday, 26 September, at the Ali Sabih Joint Battalion. This event, chaired by General Tahir Ali Mohammed, Deputy Chief of the Defense Staff, Colonel Mohammed Jama Douali, Commander of the Republican Guard, was attended by Mr. Musa Aden Miqani, Prefect of Ali Sabih Region, Mr. Umar Ahmed Wais, President of the Ali Sabih Regional Council, and the military authorities and civil society of the Ali Sabih Region. This training course, which took place from 1st January to 27 September 2019 at the training center of the Ali Sabih Joint Battalion, was divided into two phases. At first phase of 3 months to obtain the elementary certificate for junior officers, followed by 2 weeks as well as on the second phase of 4 months to obtain the military certificate of first degree necessary to exercise the profession of a group leader. All of these training courses were sanctioned by a week of examination and a week of raid. Participating alongside the PI's military colleagues as well as the National Gendarmerie to the various missions of the fight against smuggling, illegal trafficking, and border surveillance, the CMI and CM1 trainees were able to put the acquired knowledge into practice and thus demonstrate their operation capacity. During an anti-smuggling mission, 2 trainees reached an intervention that resulted in the arrest of a criminal wanted by the National Gendarmerie. In his speech during this ceremony, the Colonel Mohammed Jama Douali, Commander of the Republican Guard, stressed that the training course was divided in 2 phases, the first one being a duration of 3 months to obtain the elementary certificate for junior officers, and the second phase for 4 months to obtain the military certificate of first degree necessary to exercise the profession of a team leader. The purpose of this training, he said, was to provide the interns with the necessary technical and tactical skills, both in terms of know-how and interpersonal skills to manage, lead, persuade, and train a group, he said. As for the General Tahir Ali Mohammed, Deputy Chief of Staff of Defense, said that this training was extensive, and the manager thought to the trainees all the dimensions of a professional and non-commissioned officer. During the 8-month internship, they drew on their physical, moral, and intellectual reserves to be able to cope with various deprivation and learn the fundamentals of a non-commissioned officer, according to him. And at the end of the training, the trainees will be assigned to the various Republican Guard units, some of which will be responsible for commanding and training a group of soldiers and organizing their activities. The success of this training also stems from the quality of the instructors who played a fundamental role in the transmission of know-how and interpersonal skills. And at the end of the ceremony, the 42 trainees were awarded the rank of sergeant, and it is thanks to their efforts and dedication that this internship was completed. In this search notice, the Adawi Roble family is looking for their daughter named Ralia Adawi Roble, who is reported missing on September 21st, 2019, around 11 a.m. The last time she left her home, she wore a multicolored traditional dress and a blue scarf. The lady is mentally ill, hence the reason for her disappearance. Please contact these numbers below in case you find Ralia Adawi Roble. 7735 39 66, 77 87 12 24, and 7703 24 90. Moving on to the international news, the Peruvian forest emptied of its fauna 2.3 million burned animals. The more environmental experts advance through the end of the world landscapes of eastern Bolivia, ravaged by huge fires, the more devastating they become. The toll has just been taken, and the loss to wildlife is unprecedented. In the department of Santa Cruz alone, the most destroyed. It is estimated that more than 2.3 million animals trapped by fire have died from burning, and the estimate that is getting finer every day and may even exceed this already impressive figure. The list of endemic species that have disappeared is very long. Felines, deer, rodents, none of these families have been spared. And that's all for this edition. Thank you for joining us on the radio television of Djibouti, and have a wonderful evening.